Broadcasting from New York City to the world, it's the G-Man Interviews.
Welcome. If there were organizations or individuals with white racist views, Scott Shepherd was closely associated with them. Shepherd, who spent the early part of his life in Mississippi and Texas, attended college in Mississippi and Georgia. After graduating, he relocated to Memphis, Tennessee, where he was introduced to the white nationalist movement and went on to obtain a high-ranking leadership position within a number of white nationalist organizations. Shepherd was also a member of the Ku Klux Klan and served as Imperial Wizard, Grand Wizard, and National Leader of the Omerta Knights of the Ku Klux Klan. His other affiliations included the National Association for the Advancement of White People and the European American Unity Rights Organization, both founded by former Louisiana Governor and Klansman David Duke. In an effort to teach what he described as uneducated whites about the movement, Shepherd created the National White Rights Association and the White Rights Organization. The Mississippi native also had connections to pro-white organizations in South Africa and other countries. These connections included extremist and anti-government groups. Some were labeled militia or mercenary groups and were considered paramilitary, such as the Civilian Material Assistance Group, also known as the CMA, an anti-government and anti-communist organization with operations in Central America. Shepherd was a candidate for state representative and governor in the state of Tennessee in the late 80s and early 90s, and proudly campaigned as a white nationalist. Today, Scott Shepherd has a very different view on race in America and has chosen to speak out against the white nationalist movement and other racist organizations he loved and supported. The man who spent the majority of his life vehemently campaigning for racial separation has become an advocate for racial harmony and the recipient of numerous death threats from individuals and organizations associated with the white nationalist movement. Despite the threats to his life, he is determined to prevent others, especially young people, from falling victim to the propaganda and recruitment tactics used by the white nationalist movement and other racist groups. Welcome to the show, Mr. Shepherd.
Thank you. Honored to be here.
I'll begin by asking who or what was responsible for your introduction to the white nationalist movement.
Actually, my introduction to it was in Indianola, Mississippi at the age of about 17 years old. My hometown is Indianola, Mississippi, which is actually the birthplace of the White Citizens Council. Growing up in the Mississippi Delta, the days of racial segregation and when they were integrated in the schools, I think that's when my introduction to the white racialist movement started because of the conflict that was going on at that time in the early 60s.
How did family members respond to your affiliation with hate groups?
It caused a lot of conflict within my family because my mother and father, they did not promote racism at all. They were not racist people. The school systems were being integrated at the time. There was 5 children in my family. They came in and they said, look, we're going to take you out of the schools and we're going to put you in private schools during the days of integration. And my mother and father, and at the time, yes, they sent us to private schools, but I was not able to go to private school because there was, like I said, 4 children. My parents were not rich. They couldn't afford to send me to a private school. So I went down into the minority section of the black area. It was and I'll call it the black area town just to, be honest of how things were in the 1960s and 70s. But went into the black schools, and at the time I think I was like one of 5 students in a school of 300 blacks. And at the time, it was a culture shock. It was a culture shock not just for myself, but it was also a culture shock for the black students and the black people. This was something that had been brewing and a lot of conflict, riots and things of that nature. So it was just not a culture shock to white people. It was a culture shock to the blacks also. And, rightfully so, they had a right, and, it was understandable that they did not know how to accept what was going on with the days of integration.
And once you joined the organizations, how long did it take you to go from a regular member to a high-ranking official?
I joined at the age of 17, and by the time I was 19 years old, I was head of the state of Tennessee as Grand Dragon.
What were you required to do in order to obtain a leadership position?
Well, basically, the organization I joined at that time was the Ku Klux Klan. The Ku Klux Klan is basically an organization, of course, and they definitely have an image problem because the image is true. They were a violent organization in the past, and they still are today. But at the time, of course, just had to follow directions and did have to carry out acts of intimidation, cross burnings, and things of that nature. I put forth a lot of effort and put my whole heart into this organization. And the people that were ahead of me, above me, my superiors, saw this, and they just brought me through the front ranks, pretty fast.
On more than one occasion, you said you did things in your past that you're deeply ashamed of or regret.
Oh, yeah.
Can you give one key example?
Well, definitely. Of course, I had a lot of knowledge of assaults and beatings upon minorities at the time. And, these are things I really regret because I didn't speak out. I did not participate in a lot of those, but I did participate in a lot of intimidations or cross burnings. So I had a lot of knowledge of, violent activity that was going on, planned, burnings of churches and things of this nature.
But you never took part in any of the church burnings?
No, I didn't. I didn't take part in any of the church burnings because at the time I was in transition. I went into the Klan and to the organizations. I left and went into the military. I was in the military for a period of time. After I got out of the military is when I actually started, I call it hardcore racism and living a racist life, going around the country promoting racism, participating in rallies, participating in demonstrations, and then of course I went to college and became a funeral director, and I was actually placed into a lot of high-ranking positions because of my position as a funeral director. Like I said, the Klan, they're a bogus organization, and they base the thing on the image change. They want you to think they're changing the image, and they're not. But here I had a college degree. My profession required me to wear a suit, every day. So sure, they put me out front to give them a good image. Of course, this caused me to be able to bypass a lot of the activity as far as violence and being able to, having to participate in that because they put me up front as an image maker and recruitment and, making appearances for them.
What event or person forced you to change?
What event or person?
Or person forced you to change?
Well, I left the life behind, and of course, I personally, after leaving the life behind and taking a cold hard look at what went on in the past and stuff, I doubt or sometimes wonder, are these racist beliefs that I had, were they really, really embedded into my heart, or was I doing it for a reason or a specific reason of something like that? And what happened, I was in Nashville, Tennessee. I lived a life of a hardcore racist, appeared on national TV talk shows, filing lawsuits against the city of Pulaski, which we actually won on behalf of the Klan, all kinds of demonstrations. And I was in Nashville, Tennessee in a restaurant. And I had been investigated or questioned by the FBI regarding some mail bombs that had been sent out to some politicians, black politicians and white politicians over in Alabama and Georgia. And some were even killed and some were injured. And I had been questioned by the FBI regarding that. So I was in Nashville, so I know I was what. But I left the restaurant and I had been eating and I had a few drinks. I left the restaurant and then I was pulled over. I looked out my back window and not only did I see blue lights, I saw an ocean of blue lights. So I got out of the car and then I was arrested for, of course, under the influence, and I also had a firearm. That threw me into the court system. Okay, I got into the system and even talked to a lawyer, and I said, you know what? I'm going to pull something that's been used many times. I'm going to enroll myself into an alcohol and drug treatment center. I'm going to go into this treatment center for 30 days, come out, beat these charges, have them dropped, and go on living my racist life. But what I didn't know is when I entered that treatment center, I was going to go in one person and come out another. I went into the treatment center. I was exposed to all kinds of counseling that I was forced to take. I met people of all religions, people of all races. We sat down. We shared our intimate, stories of our life with each other. And I got to know these other people. And I came out a different person. I was able to take a cold, hard look inside this treatment center and find out that I did not really have a problem with people of color. My problem was Scott Shepherd. I had problems with myself that I used and projected the negativism off on other people and directed it to, people of color, blacks, other religions, and things of that nature, not being able to deal with the problems within myself. So the problem was Scott Shepherd, not people of color. I went into that treatment center, came out, was a different person.
When setting up this interview, you informed me that you had an extremely close relationship with Byron Beckwith, the man responsible for the murder of Mississippi civil rights activist Medgar Evers. You also said Beckwith, who proclaimed his innocence until the very end, confessed to the murder. When and under what circumstances did this take place?
My past has been entwined with convicted murderers. Byron David Beckwith, who was a truly a grandfather to me at one time. Byron David Beckwith killed Medgar Evers. He never admitted it publicly to other people, but I was sitting in court with him one time in his last trial before they convicted him. And, of course, being in the mind concept that I was and stuff, I looked at Byron. I said, Byron, I said, this is a witch hunt. They trying to pull just to convict you for Medgar Evers. He looked me straight in the eye and said, they may have the right witch, but they will not convict me. And, I thought about that over the years, and even after he went to prison and, of course, died, that man outright admitted to me that he did it with that one statement. And I may possibly be the only person in the country that he actually said that to or admitted it to, but he did. He said, they may have the right witch, but they'll not convict me. I'm probably one of the first or only persons that he's ever openly admitted that, yes, he did kill Medgar Evers.
While serving as a national representative, you met and worked with icons in the white nationalist movement and the Ku Klux Klan, like Tom Metzger and David Duke. Do you believe Metzger and Duke still pose a serious threat to this country?
Those two, both of those are very dangerous men. They pose a big threat to this country. Because David Duke, not only is he, David Duke is a person that, of course, I believe that, he's a charlatan also. But he's also a true believer in what he preaches. So, when you mix those two together, it's a dangerous situation. Tom Metzger, very violent prone man and affects a lot of people, instigates violence and things of that nature. And of course, I know he's not been able to be prosecuted for any of it yet. I expect it to happen, but yes, he's a very violent man. He's a big threat because he promotes the lone wolf tactics of violence against, minorities and even against the government. And Tom Metzger, is behind a lot of this.
You had connections to pro-white organizations in South Africa and other countries. With regard to South Africa, are most of the organizations still operating? And if so, what's their master plan for the region?
Well, the organization that I was associated with, and like I said, it was a long time ago, and I even forgot the name of the organization now, but I was connected with them and have worked with them, and they somewhat are now defunct now and not really in operation. I think the leader was assassinated, or no, he wasn't assassinated. He was just killed, and I don't think it was really race related, but he was killed. But yes, I had some association with them, and had set up dialogue and had planned to travel to South Africa and meet with these people, and they were going to come to the United States also, and they were going to meet with me also here. But the changes in my life at the timing, all that ended, and I just disassociated myself with them. And their plan, their plan in South Africa is basically the same as what these white supremacists in the United States wish to do, is to carve out all white homeland. And they'll tell you, just like Steve Howard that you interviewed, of course he stated he thinks minorities ought, if they want to have a homeland of their own and whites have a home. I mean, that's all garbage. I mean, I don't understand it. We need to all live together in this country as human beings and as Americans, or throughout the world as, humans. Steve Howard promotes the carving of an all-white homeland. Sure, that's what he wishes. And he says that he doesn't have a problem with blacks or other minorities or other races doing the same thing. But I think that's all garbage. I can't understand why we can't just live together in this country as human beings and Americans, and not only in America but throughout the world, and get past all this racism. They talking about that. There's going to be a racial war, that blacks are going to cause the race war. Again, that's poppycock. The white supremacists, they're going to be the ones responsible for it. But they're going to put the blame off on minorities and other minorities, blacks, or other religions.
Can you tell us more about the Civilian Material Assistance Group, or CMA?
Sure. The CMA started out as a Civilian Military Assistance was the name of it. And then, of course, they ran into a little trouble with it sounding too militant, so they changed it to the Civilian Material Assistance, because they wanted to portray the organization as giving material assistance to the Contras down in Nicaragua. And they doing this, of course, with civilian military assistance, it portrayed them as giving work, but they changed the name and covered this up. And I got involved with the civilian military assistance, then civilian material assistance, after the name change, with a friend of mine that was a high-ranking member of the CMA. And I got involved with that, and it was ran by Tom Posey, who was a white supremacist. So the whole goal of the CMA not only was trying to say they were fighting communism in Nicaragua, down in Guatemala and Nicaragua, was also a white supremacist organization, and they were involved in arms deals, illegal weapons and weapon sales.
If the CMA was a mercenary, paramilitary, and pro-white group operating in different countries, how likely is it that members of the group were secretly embedded in private security companies contracted by the U.S. government?
Oh, there was a lot of them. There was a lot of them that were embedded into these organizations. They were embedded into, I'm not sure. There was an organization like Blackwater. There was a lot of these mercenaries that were involved in Blackwater, and they were also trained in mercenary camps down in Alabama. It was all of course, sure, they wanted to fight communism, but they did not come out and, openly promote white nationalist viewpoints, because they were getting funding, from a lot of high-ranking people or attorneys and things like that. And if they had openly spoke out as a white nationalist group, they would not get any funding from these people. And some of this came out. And Tom Posey, like I said, was known to be a Klansman. And at one time, associated with them, I had access to Stinger missiles that I could have put my hands on in 2 weeks. And this is the kind of things that they were involved with.
During my interview with Tom Metzger, former leader of White Aryan Resistance, also known as WAR, he noted that infiltrating various agencies or departments within the military, federal, state, and local government, and law enforcement would be the most effective method of accomplishing the movement's objectives. Has the movement failed or succeeded in this effort?
I think they've succeeded. I mean, as far as the military, I know big time in the military because they got a lot of people that are working within the military that are white supremacists and come out and then openly start promoting white nationalist ideas. But they are promoting, and a lot of the white supremacist organizations are encouraging people to go into the military. And the reason for this is, where else can they get the best training, paramilitary training, war training, combat training, than the United States military, free of charge, and then come out and then they can use this actually against their own government that taught it to them. Because that's one of the goals too, is that, they wish to overthrow the United States government.
Let's move on to politics. As a former candidate who openly ran as a racist, you were able to look at and engage in the political process in a way that many in this country never will. The Tea Party and the far right within the Republican Party are viewed as racist by a number of people in the country. Given everything you know about the white nationalist movement and the world of politics, would you say this assessment of the parties is a fair one?
I would say, to an extent, yes. Of course, I do. I do think there are some people within the Republican Party and Tea Party. Of course, there are some Tea Party members that are black, but that the views and the things that they promote, do go hand in hand with some of the white supremacist organizations. They won't openly say that. But it's, it can be a very dangerous situation. The Republican Party has always been considered a conservative organization. But Pat Buchanan, of course, I used to admire Pat Buchanan. Pat Buchanan has appeared several times on a Memphis talk show here in Memphis, the Political Cesspool. Political Cesspool is a racist radio station. They promote racism. They promote white nationalist ideas. David Duke is a regular on that program. Ted Nugent, who recently, of course, the musician Ted Nugent, espouses white nationalist ideas also. So, this organization is having a lot of the Tea Party people and Republican Party people on this show, and that itself tells you that's the views that they are courting.
It's no secret that a significant number of Tea Party members and supporters, Republicans and Democrats, are country music fans. I was told that you're a big fan of the music as well. This being the case, you're probably aware of the deep, dark secret associated with country music, which has come to be known as race music. Over the last few years, the demand for Johnny Rebel's music has surged in this country and abroad, thanks to songs like Nigger Hatin' Me and Who Likes a Nigger. Rebel recorded the songs back in the 1960s. I decided to do an episode on this subject and contacted the Academy of Country Music, the Country Music Hall of Fame, and representatives for some of country music's biggest stars, including Alabama, Dolly Parton, Loretta Lynn, Toby Keith, and the Oak Ridge Boys, in order to get their reaction to the disturbing trend. No one responded. I'm mentioning this because your Facebook page features an article on one country music superstar that had no problem manning up when addressing racial issues, and he actually went toe-to-toe with the Ku Klux Klan. What can you tell us about this aspect of Johnny Cash's life and personality?
Johnny Cash was openly attacked, of course, verbally and protested against by the Ku Klux Klan. He was criticized, threatened, and mainly because of the issues with his, like I said, his wife. I think they said, a lot of them wanted to say that his wife was, minority or black, when in fact she was, I think, pretty much all Italian. He had no problem standing up, to the Ku Klux Klan and openly did so. I have got to put a plug in for, Brad Paisley and LL Cool J, they got together and did a song. A lot of people criticized that, but I think a lot of people criticized it because they really did not listen to the song. And I've got to put a plug in and give them, thumbs up, because I think they were getting together, and I think they were really trying to make a statement against racism and do something that would be a positive thing. And a lot of people criticized it, but I think it was a good thing, and I got to plug them for that. They stepped in and made a statement. That's my opinion about just what the song I heard, and I didn't understand all the lyrics in the song, and I went and looked all the lyrics up on the internet where they printed up. I understood the song. I just got to plug them because they stepped in and made a statement against racism. It was a black rapper and a white country singer. To me, it made a strong statement that these two came together and made a stand.
What measures have you taken to protect yourself and your family after receiving the death threats?
Of course, I've received a lot of death threats, but I disassociate myself. Well, I say I don't disassociate myself. I don't put out into of course, like with Facebook, multimedia, things like that. Sure, a lot of people know the area I'm in, where I live. But I spend a lot of time in different cities also, and I just don't always publicize where I'm at a given time. My family is very non-racist. Now, at one time, one of my sons were picking up on some of my beliefs when he was a teenager. And, of course, that was another thing. I saw that, and that, started making me take a cold, hard look at some of my beliefs. I didn't want my son getting involved in that, and thank goodness that, he didn't after I changed, and he kind of moved away from that, that way of thinking, and never did pick up the racist views and start practicing them. But, to be honest with you, I don't hide. I just don't broadcast where I'm at all the time because of the death threats, but I don't hide. The death threats are going to come. I faced the death threats when I was on the other side of the fence fighting as a racist. Now I'm on this side of the fence, anti-racism, but I know I'm doing the right thing. And I just don't, I don't hide. I just accept it and let it go.
Have you been speaking with federal authorities like the FBI in terms of the threats, and are they actively involved in an investigation? What can you say?
Well, I can say this. Yes, they have been notified. There's not really an active investigation because I haven't really pushed the issue. It's been a while since I've received a threat. I think the last one was back in March. But, yes, they've been put on notice. They know I've had threats and whatever, and, I'm in contact with them every time I receive a threat, yes.
They say a leopard never changes its spots. You were a powerful and significant part of the white nationalist movement and its culture, and you swore a lifelong allegiance to it. People listening to this interview might say, he was too deeply embedded in the culture and lifestyle to ever change. I'm not buying his redemption story. I know you've been speaking out against racism at various venues across the country. But what else have you done, or what else are you willing to do to try and persuade those who doubt you?
Well, of course, you've touched on something that sure I'm aware of. I know that people may doubt it, and I understand that. I definitely understand it. But I've always thought, actions speak louder than words. You have people all over the country that say, yeah, I used to believe that, but I don't believe it now. But what are they doing? I'm trying to make up for what I did in the past. I hurt a lot of people just by words and my actions, and I have decided, to make it my mission to speak out against racism and take action. People can change, but actions speak louder than words. I'm willing to do whatever it takes, to fight this racism and stop, the spread of these white supremacist groups taking advantage of our young people. And that's the ones they target to bring into their groups, these troubled young people, because that's where they got me. I was a troubled child, I was a troubled teenager, and I was sucked into that. But I'm speaking out. And like I said, I know people aren't going to believe it, or some won't believe it. Watch my actions. I would not put myself in danger or out in the public life. I could go on living a life just in seclusion or quietly without saying a word. But see, what happened is in 2010, and I was doing that. In 2010, I almost died. And when I almost died, I said, I know what was killing me. I ended up with stomach ulcers. And I know for a fact that these stomach ulcers resulted from the secret that I held within myself. I held in the secrets, of my past as a supremacist. And they say that your secrets will eat you up. I believe that 100%. I believe I ate myself up with my secrets. I ended up having to have 3/4 of my stomach cut out due to the ulcers. I ended up having a second surgery. I ended up having a gastric pacemaker implant into my stomach because it became paralyzed. Almost died. After 6 or 8 weeks in the hospital, when I got out, I continued to think about this, and I said, I can no longer keep this a secret. I think it's time that I open up, use my past, and try to prevent this from happening to any other person, on earth, or specifically in this country, and young people. That's where we got to put our target, as far as, trying to prevent the spread of racism. I would not go out or go to the trouble and put myself in danger by putting it out public. Actually, there's two. I got 2 open blogs that are on the internet. I would not go to the trouble and put my life and family in danger if I was not truly dedicated and devoted to what I'm doing now, because, I'm sorry. I have apologized. I've apologized to a lot of people for my past, and I would probably be apologizing the rest of my life for the things I've done. But that's okay. I'm man enough to apologize and say I was wrong. And I've even reached out to some of the news media people here in Memphis that knew me from years ago when I was practicing all these beliefs, and some of them were African Americans, and I offended them. I know I offended them by my beliefs, and I've contacted them. One has become a close friend, Kim Clark, who is with Channel 5. She said, yes, I remember you well, and I somehow wondered if you would ever change. And she is, she's a good friend of mine now. And like I said, I've reached out and I've tried to apologize and probably be apologizing the rest of my life. But I would, why would I do this? I could sit back and just live a quiet life and let it go, but I don't want to sit back and live a quiet life and let it go and people still think I'm the same person when I can turn around and use my life and my experience to help some of these younger people. And I'm not talking about white kids that are being drawn into white supremacist groups. My experience can also help African American children and kids that are troubled, that are being drawn into gangs, because the gangs actually operate the same way these white supremacist groups do. They get these troubled kids, they draw them in, give them a home, a feeling of belonging, that they're a family. But what am I willing to do? There's nothing that I will not do. Like I said, my actions speak for themselves. There was a broadcast station come out of Australia that when the Ku Klux Klan was here in Memphis back in March, and I spoke out against them also, and I received death threats on that, and was on the news speaking out against the rally, and at the same time, I did a documentary with Triple Hate. I don't know if you saw that or not.
Yes, I did. I did see it. It was
Did you
very
see
good.
that? Triple Hate with Vice Network. But, you know, I went out and I spoke. I even went as far as calling the head of that Klan organization. I was, you know, trying to just do anything to try to keep them from coming to Memphis and turning this into another 1998 ordeal where people were rioting. There was violence that broke out and people were hurt. I did not want it to turn into another Greensboro, North Carolina, where people were killed, actually murdered. And I tried to reach out to the Klan, and of course their reply was death threats. but that's okay, you know. I tried, and they can threat all they want. I know I'm on the right side. I'm on the right team now, and I got a lot of people on my team that will stand by me. Like I said, my actions speak for themselves. I'll speak out.
I really appreciate your willingness to take part in this discussion, especially with your life having been threatened on a number of occasions. Thank you very much, Mr. Shepard.
I appreciate it. I enjoy doing whatever I can to, you know, fight this disease of racism, and I appreciate you giving me the opportunity to talk.
Ladies and gentlemen, it's possible that a bullseye has been placed on my back, too, for having Scott Shepard on my show. If that's the price I have to pay for presenting the truth, then so be it. However, let me be very clear about one thing. If anyone in the white nationalist movement decides to come looking for me, I can assure them that a special welcoming committee will be waiting for them, right here in Harlem. I'm the G-Man, and until next time, stay cool, stay safe, and stay informed.